Hi there, everyone. I hope you're having a great Christmas and New Year. It's really good to see you. And today it's a little bit more unusual. I'm going to be reviewing a wagon, and this is a wagon that's caught my eye in the run up to Christmas. So I thought, actually, I wanted to tell you guys about this because it wasn't what I thought it was. Well, if that isn't enough of a mystery for you, stay tuned, take a look, and I'll make that mystery come clear. Well, here it is, and you may be thinking that this is a wagon that's been out for quite some time. And you'd be right. It's appeared in a number of different guises, and I must admit that up until now, I'd been thinking it was remarkably similar to these, the HTO wagons from Hornby, and I kind of hadn't really given it a second look. But I'm glad that I did, because it turns out this is a remarkably different wagon, and it's actually very, very well detailed, and there's a few points I'm going to point out on it that have really impressed me that I think you might be interested in too. So on the end of the box there, we've got our 6838 BR 20-ton coke hopper, and then its running number there. And this is actually with the tops running code of HCO, which is one of the reasons that it was attracted to me. And I have tried peeling off the price sticker. I'm not showing off or anything, but that is actually what I've paid for it. They can be had for a little bit less and also a little bit more depending on how new the release that you pick up is. I've also seen them about in 3-packs as well, so there's a huge amount of choice on these, pretty much like that HTO wagon that I just briefly mentioned as well. This seems to have come out in comparable numbers. So we'll get rid of the box. So here we are, out of the box, because let's not dwell on the box. This is what we really want to look at. And here is the hopper. Now, coke is actually surprisingly light compared to coal. So again, I'm going to bring this back in, and this is notionally a 21-ton wagon, but you can see it's actually quite a bit smaller, and the main reason for that is quite simply that when coal goes through the coking process, it actually becomes lighter because the coal tar and the gas is forced out of it, and what you're basically left with is a much cleaner carbon deposit with none of that kind of smoky, sulphurous stuff, and it's the reason why actually it gets used for smokeless fuel. But here is the wagon. You can see there, as I said before, HCO is the code on it. And I was quite surprised at this. I hadn't realised that these wagons had survived into the tops period, but it turns out they must have done. And I've seen actually from Hornby, there's a number of these that they've produced with the tops code. And they're also available in some different liveries. And I'm going to run through those now before I forget about them. The BR Grey that you see here, pretty typical of an unbraked BR wagon, but they've also been available in a BR bauxite livery, and I'm not sure whether they represent an air-piped version or a vacuum brake version because I don't actually have any, but it was the thing that BR did actually paint through pipe stock. They didn't actually have train acting brakes for itself, but had the through pipe, did confusingly sometimes get painted in the bauxite colour, more commonly associated with fitted wagons. The chassis itself is really nicely done, and you can see it's even got the detail of the bottom hopper doors and the rivets all on there, and I just really quite like that. You know, we've got the chassis as well, but at the bottom of these hoppers is really nicely done. The couplings are in NEM pockets, and because it's quite a long wheelbase wagon with quite an overhang on there, these have been fitted into these slightly innovative, slightly mobile NEM pockets. They're basically, when I say mobile, I mean they've got this lateral movement there, and it's very reminiscent of, I remember back in the early 80s, I think it was the OAA wagon that Hornby did, and the VDA van that they also did, had these kind of weird springy tails to kind of give this self-centering mechanism. I wasn't massively convinced with them on the old OAA wagons. They had this habit of breaking off, but on this they do seem to actually be fairly resilient. If you're wanting to use another form of couplings that doesn't need the NEM pocket, they're held on with these little screws, so you can actually completely take this mechanism off, and it is a trend that I'm starting to see from manufacturers, which actually is quite helpful to a number of modelers. All the braking on here is nicely done. The brake shoes line up with the wheel faces, which, it should do. We've also got the representation of these tie bars between the W irons, and the reason for these is actually quite simple. The brake blocks are applying on the inside of each axles in that way, so when the brakes are on, it's kind of pushing the axles apart and puts stresses on these W irons. So the reason these tie bars are there is to quite literally tie the two axle boxes together so that those brakes don't just push them apart. So, it makes the wagon less prone to damage, but also probably improves the efficiency of the handbrake. And it is just a handbrake on these wagons. They're untrained brake fitted. There's some really nice hooks on the underside here, and you can see these are, I think they may even be metal. It's hard to tell, but they are pretty durable, and I suspect that that's an anchoring point for something like a sheet that might be put over the top of these wagons just to protect the load from either bits of dust blowing out or indeed from getting wet. I guess if these were going to somewhere like a steelworks, which were big users of coke, then maybe for whatever reason they didn't want the load to get saturated with rainwater. The tempo printing is really nice and fine. Not just the data panels on the wagon, but you can see there we've got this tempo printing into the wagon's sole bars and chassis detail, and it's really nicely done. And I can just about see that, the crispness on that builder's plate there in particular is really nice, and I've got every faith that under close magnification we're going to see that that is perfectly legible, and this is an area that Hornby really does excel with. And if I bring back in the HTO, it's something that on one of these examples, not this particular one, we actually found a little Easter egg in there. I don't think it was intentional from Hornby, but the tempo printing was actually capable of printing stuff finer than the people who were working from the original photos were able to read what it was supposed to say, which was quite intriguing. The lettering on these data panels here is really nice and crisp, and it's interesting that this is a wagon that has metric weights on rather than imperial ones. So this wagon must have been in service right at the point that BR kind of started to go metric with some of the tear and load weights on these wagons. So I guess this must have survived into at least the late 70s, or did it even survive later into the early 80s? There were still some unbraked wagons trundling around the BR network until the mid to late 80s in some rare cases, and I do wonder whether this wagon might have been a late survivor. The buffers aren't spring-loaded, but they are these turned brass buffer faces and heads, and they are pretty well in there, but they are so strong and yet so slender, and I really do like the quality of these that's coming through from the manufacturers. The rivet detail on this riveted body side is really nicely done. Again, it could have been something that was very slab-sided and looked plasticky, but Hornby have steered clear of that, and this rivet detail is absolutely exquisite. The gussets at the bottom, again, are really quite fine, and then when we move higher, these kind of greedy boards at the top, which are, I suppose, wood on the real wagon, are really nicely done, even down to the gaps, all the way through to the inside between them. It's not just relief moulding, they actually have the gaps between the planks moulded all the way through, and that is one of the features that I really like about these. Turning to the inside, this is where the other area, which I really like, comes in. Not just this fine riveted detail and this hopper bottom that is really nicely realised, but it's got internal ribs. And this is an area which is quite difficult to injection mould, believe me, which is why an awful lot of wagons you see have a very basic internal level of detail. Not so on this hopper. They've got all of the internal ribs, all the rivet detail, and indeed there's also this bar across the middle as well, just as per the prototype. And on the prototype, this is effectively there simply to stop the outsides of the hopper body from being able to bow outwards. It's just kind of a reinforcement strut, but it's there, and I can get my finger all the way underneath it. And it's just little things like that that really make me look at this wagon and think, that's really nice. So I can well see myself in the near future building up a rake of these. At the moment, this is the only one that I've got, but I'm actually going to go back to the shop where I got this because they had several others of the other running numbers and liveries in there. They had some of the 3-packs. In fact, it was Arcadia models in Shaw. So there's an awful lot of these still in stock, but I have seen them for sale through Rails of Sheffield, Hatton's, 53A models, just to give some examples. So they are still out there, available in BR liveries and also a kind of LMS livery too. I've seen in a private owner livery for, I think it was Appleby Frodingham steel mill rings a bell. There's certainly a whole host of different interesting liveries that these wagons carry and have been reproduced from Hornby. Other detail, well, it's just, there's so much here. We've even got a representation of the springs would have been on the prototype behind the buffers. They're non-working, but they are there. And you really do have to give a lot of credit for that. The handbrake handles, these appear to be plastic. There's quite a bit of spring to them, but they are really, really fine. You look at them and you think, that's going to be broken easily. But actually, I'm giving that a blooming good prodding, and it's not breaking. It is actually very versatile. The W-irons too, there's a lot of air gaps through there. And it's just really is exquisite how fine the injection moulding is on this model. Overall, again, I'm not going to give a score because my scores at the moment just seem to be all 10 out of 10. I'm very enthusiastic about a lot of these products coming through, and they really are fine products. So, this is an amazing model. Can I recommend it? Certainly, yes, I can. Will I be buying more of these? Certainly, yes. I want to build up a full rake of these. I think they're a lovely model, and I may even try to weather them. All this exquisite riveting detail just lends itself to a dirty colour wash. Humbrol do make a series of different colour washes which make weathering really, really easy, and we actually showed that on a video where we did a how-to weathering guide with the Humbrol weathering washes, and I can see that this wagon would be a really good candidate to bring this over and above the excellent standard that Hornby have achieved. Well, I hope that video was very informative to you. Don't forget to like this video and share it too, and also subscribe to the channel and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But until next time, you take really good care of yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And a huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Alan, oorail.co.uk and Tepic. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knob T Mouse. Thanks and catch you later.